Stabilize. Live. Form. Disappear. Worthless. Worthless. Here. Worthless. Worthless.
Welcome new and old players to my Xiao guide. In this video, I'll try and go through everything you'll need to know in terms of builds, artifacts, themes, and some tips you might not know about him when you're trying to play him properly. I've been playing Xiao as my main since his first banner, and I always have him in my team in the overworld because he's probably the character that I enjoy using the most. Although he isn't the best DPS out there, Xiao's main strength is his AoE damage and the fact that if you hyper invest into him as a hyper carry, he will do some surprising numbers, and he does not require a specific team except for some key supports like Sucrose and maybe Zhongli, and doesn't really require an artifact set. So let's get right into the talents and talent priority. Starting with his normal attack, he performs up to 6 consecutive strikes, and his charge attack is sort of like an uppercut claw thingy that consumes stamina. It looks pretty cool. And the only real thing we care about here is his plunging attack. His elemental skill is a quick dash that deals anemo damage. This ability has 2 charges and has a cooldown of 10 seconds. This skill actually does quite a bit of damage and generates anemo particles for Xiao. Lastly, the main part of his kit, Bane of All Evil, is his elemental burst. This infuses Xiao's weapon with anemo and converts all of the damage he is dealing into anemo damage. This also provides an attack damage bonus and gives Xiao super jump, and continuously drains his HP for the duration of the burst. His burst lasts for 15 seconds and has a cooldown of 18, so you spend those few seconds of downtime on your supports reapplying any buffs or batterying him in order to burst off cooldown. As for his talent priority, you want to level up your normal attack and burst up evenly up to level 7 to get the reduced HP drain during the burst, while also leveling up the skill. As for which talents to take further or even crown, you want to prioritize the normal attacks first before the burst, as the burst boosts the plunge damage based off of the normal attack and is dependent on that talent level. For constellations, C1 is quite good for a little bit of extra damage and the ability to battery himself a little bit more. C2 is useless. C3 gives you a little bit more damage. C4 is useless. C5 again is another damage boost, and C6 changes Xiao's playstyle to make it so his elemental skill is his main source of damage. This constellation allows him to become one of the best and the highest consistent damage dealers in the game, and changes your talent priority to maxing out the elemental skill first. If you're C6ing him though, you probably already planned to triple crown him, so there's no point in talking about this. As for artifacts, as I mentioned in the intro, Xiao doesn't require a specific set because, well, he doesn't really have one, and what really matters is your substat efficiency over anything else. This doesn't mean artifact sets are useless. You would ideally want him on a 2-piece Gladiators or Shimenawas or Viridescent. You can choose any of those two, depending on the substat rolls, and Xiao doesn't necessarily need the Viridescent 2-piece. I personally run him with a 2-piece Shimenawas 2-piece Gladiators set, so don't bother trying to get perfect pieces from the Viridescent set. Stats you should prioritize are crit damage over crit rate. Attack and energy recharge aren't that bad either. For the main stats, you want an attack sands, an anemo goblet, but if you don't have a good anemo goblet yet, an attack goblet will do as a temporary piece, and a crit rate or crit damage circlet depending on your stats and your weapon. And speaking of the weapon, the Blackcliff polearm is probably the best 4-star and what I would suggest to most Xiao players, as it is attainable as a free-to-play, and this is the weapon I used on him before I got the Homa on its rerun. As for other options, Deathmatch is pretty good, and Favlance is usable. Xiao is kind of lacking in 4-star options, even if miHoYo has given us the catch for free, because the effect is pretty useless for Xiao, and the 3 craftable polearms that are available don't really benefit him in any way. His weapon choices become much broader when it comes to 5-star polearms, as he can use a lot of them pretty well. The Jade Spear is the weapon made for him, but the Homa will net you similar damage depending on your substats. The Vortex Vanquisher isn't a bad choice, as it is a very good stat stick, and you will most likely be running him with a shielder like Zhongli or Diona, and will be able to fully utilize the passive. If you don't have any of these options, the Skyward Spine and the new Calamity Queller will also give you more damage than any of the 4-star options if your artifact substats are good enough. In my opinion, Xiao only requires 2 things: a battery, so someone like Sucrose, and a shielder or at least a healer, so someone like Bennett and Diona. I think Diona is a really good choice here if you don't have Zhongli, and this is basically the core of your team comp. Xiao does not really have a dedicated support like Sarah and Goro are to Raiden and Ito, so his team comps are quite flexible. A really basic low investment team comp would be Sucrose, Fischl, and Diona or Bennett as your healer/shielder. And this comp gives you everything you need. Sucrose will provide the particles needed to fuel Xiao's elemental burst, while providing an attack buff with the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers. Fischl can provide decent off-field damage and extra particles, as well as use the Millith set if you're running her on low investment, and this allows her to boost Xiao's damage even more. And Diona and Bennett are here to provide him with some extra shielding/support with the Noblesse buff again to buff him even more. This is one of the most basic team comps that work, but one of Xiao's best supports is undoubtedly going to be Zhongli. He provides that elemental damage resistance shred at C0, and gives Xiao a shield that lasts for the entirety of his burst. My favorite build to run on Zhongli on a Xiao team is 4-piece Millilith with HP as the main stats, just to give him the biggest shield possible. And honestly, he gives so much to Xiao that I'd highly recommend trying to get both units if you haven't yet on their upcoming reruns, and he's the only character that I would say is almost required when building a Xiao comp just because of how good he is as C0. Compared to the more whale-like options like C4 Jean, which she provides an animal resistance decrease, and C4 Albedo, which provides you extra plunging attack damage. These aren't really attainable, and Zhongli seems more realistic for most of the players. The most important part of Xiao's playstyle is that you really don't want to be using him outside of his burst. Energy management and proper particle funneling is pretty important when you're trying to play him optimally. You usually want to use your elemental skill up before you pop your burst, as it does not generate particles during the burst's uptime. Sucrose with TTDS should also use all of her skill charges right before switching to Xiao in order to feed him with the elemental particles and the 48% attack buff. Basically, you want to use all of your team's abilities and bursts before switching to Xiao after all of the buffs are cast. As for his playstyle in Burst, the Jet combo will give you the most damage for single and even AoE damage, as the animation cancel allows you to sneak in a charge attack without sacrificing much of your DPS. Plunge spamming is okay in situations where there are many enemies, but it does not give you the highest DPS out of his combos. Xiao can sometimes be annoying to play as he knocks enemies back with his plunges, but he can easily maneuver his way in range as his plunges do have a pretty huge radius. In the overworld, Xiao can also use a plunge immediately after using his elemental skill, even if there isn't really much elevation. Like, you can use this skill right before he falls and you can do a plunging attack when you're like 2 inches off the ground. Honestly, that's pretty much all I can give a new player who wants to try and play Xiao. I know it's not a super complete guide, I know I'm working on it, I did some research, but I did spend a lot of time trying to make this video, so if you guys liked it, leave a like, sub if you want to, and I'm gonna go show you guys a short showcase of what my Xiao can do. 82 to 242. With Jade Parcels, that's why it's 82. Tenet buff, Mona ult, Xiao ulti. Ooh. I feel like a whale. I was like a 92.
公園